right, this is the Arirang Institute Bulgum Bulgum Talk Show podcast. My name is Michael. I am your host. I usually do this podcast in Korean, but because of the most recent events on the television, I've decided to do this quickly in English and possibly have some translation at some point. But I just sort of had to comment, speak to the madness that is the U.S. North Korea summit. And it's not madness. It's actually not madness. It's just a drama. It is all of the great drama wrapped into one. And so there'll be a corresponding article that we'll probably post along with this to sort of give you some bullet points. Ideas for the article title will be everything, I guess, the English speaking audience or uh, possibly the American policymakers should know about the ongoing, I guess you could call them negotiations or relationship uh, between the US and North Korea in order to accomplish this summit. The first thing I always explain to people who are unfamiliar with the Korean Peninsula, the politics of the Korean Peninsula, the politics of the Korean Peninsula is like any other place. It's all politics are local, right? So no matter how great the ideas are, how fantastic your proposal to submit to the North Koreans or the South Koreans or the U.S. and or China and everybody else involved. They all have to first and foremost protect their own interests, solidify their base, and they have to always be seen as strong, competent, in charge, taking the initiative, taking it to the enemy, right, the battle. And this often is lost. I think a lot of times on an American audience, because the American audience will look at this and, in the US, we have all sorts of other issues going on, and particularly the Trump presidency has all sorts of other uh, big problems plaguing it, issues plaguing it, as I guess you could say, distracting narratives. I like to analyze narratives, the different corresponding narratives using empirical approaches, text mining, automated text analysis, machine learning network analysis. And so the debates or the ongoing narratives and how they might possibly form I guess, a unified narrative in which everybody can agree is of the utmost importance or my interest as a researcher and academic. The narrative that Americans often do not understand is that in South Korea or North Korea, everybody is for unification. Now, you might see articles that get published every now and then by this think tank or that think tank where they sample the young audience, and the young audience will say, no, 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 we don't actually care about unification. We're just worried about our jobs. That's possibly slightly true. Um, but if you were to also ask them, well, is it okay if you were asked the South Korean young people, do you want unification? They might say no, or they might say, no, not right now. We're too busy right now. We need to make money right now. But into the future, yes, it should happen. It should eventually happen at one point, and that's an important point. If you were to sort of ask them, okay, well, you don't think it should happen now. Is it okay if China absorbs North Korea? They will respond with I can't curse on the radio maybe, but they will respond with no. There's no way that's going to happen. That shouldn't happen. That would be the worst thing possible that could happen in this instance. So the unification narrative also in North Korea is first and foremost, along with peace and stability on the peninsula. And so when you see, Kim Jong-un, President Moon, or Chairman Kim and President Moon, and they have their summit, now they might not actually lead to anything, and as a lot of commenters and pundits and experts have spoken to, it's just a show. Right, that's fine. It's just a show. It's just drama. But everybody has a role in this drama, and your role as a Korean leader cannot be to be against peace, reconciliation, redemption through unification. Right? It's the third rail. In the U.S., I don't know what the equivalent would be. You can't go against Medicare or Social Security. I don't know. Or you can't go against the troops. You can't be against the veterans, I guess you could say. But in North and South Korea, and for the Korean-speaking people of the world, the diaspora, everybody is for unification. It's just a matter of how and when, who gets to be the big dog, who gets to be the little dog, so to speak. And so when there's one of these summits or one of these negotiations or meetings, everybody has to meet and everybody has to show up and be happy about it. Well, maybe they don't have to be happy about it, but they have to show up. They have to at least portray or communicate that they want peace and they want reconciliation. But at the end of the day, people would have to lose their little fiefdoms. People in the South, people in the North, if things were to unify. And I think the model, instead of a one unified government, would be two different separate governments, is often the model gets spoken about. And that's because nobody really wants to lose their little fiefdom. Anyway, continuing on, knowing this information that you always have to be for unification. You can't not be for it. Trump, or the Trump administration, I don't know if they understand this part of the negotiation process leading up to the summit or during this whole time period, but as long as they are for unification and are for peace and they're for a peaceful resolution to denuclearization of the peninsula or just any kind of negotiation, as long as they put forth that, yes, we're for the peaceful unification of the two Koreas, that I see this as the strongest card that the U.S. can play, because the U.S. is often portrayed, and in my time in Korea, speaking with Koreans, there was a huge misconception, especially when we first started working, doing the institute work, right? The Arirang 활동, the Arirang activities of bringing people together to build trust in order to accomplish something larger. There was a huge gap between what the average Korean thought the U.S. wanted. And it usually was the U.S. wants to keep the peninsula divided. The U.S. wants to deny the Korean people their potential as a great nation. And this is a conspiracy that all large powers share. And that is why you get this very, how would you say, there's a large lack of trust right there, right? There's a large lack of trust between large powers and the Korean people, and a lot of it has to do with the trauma. There's massive trauma. First with the Japanese, they colonized Korea. They sought to get rid of Korean culture. You had to speak Japanese in the schools, and after this 30-year period, and the end of World War II and liberation, if you want to call it that, the U.S. With her allies, UN, we went in and helped the South Koreans fight back the communist threat, the North Koreans, and the peninsula ended up divided at that point. Now, it was already divided. I'm not going to go into all that, but that war was a physical trauma, right, where U.S. air campaigns destroyed, I guess some historians have calculated, almost anything that was able to be bombed was bombed during the Korean War in the North. And then if you turn around and look at the spiritual / cultural trauma with the Japanese occupation, you can start to understand why there's this large gap of trust between the Korean people and any outside powers or any outsiders, right? The Weiguk Saran, right? Any outsiders, people from a different country. But since I was able to speak Korean and speak to folks often, I was able to start to understand this and then explain to them, no, I think most Americans, the American people, are for Korean unification, a unified peninsula. But it's, at the top, things get very, very complicated, short-sighted. U.S. policymakers have other important issues on their plate. And there's distractions, and there's, Stormy Daniels, and there's all sorts of, the Russian and the collusion, and Syria, and, China, and economic trade, and the TPP. So there is a lot going on, right? And it was it was and probably still is a long shot that the North Korean summit will happen as proposed on June 12th. But what you are starting to see is how, although the Trump administration released a letter, I think it was yesterday, saying that the summit's off, but they're still willing to talk, and if North Korea wants to reach out, they can reach out. And then immediately the North Korean side responded, we want to find a peaceful resolution to these issues. And then that's where you can see that the North Koreans cannot be seen as canceling the summit, right? And so that's the game. Everybody's for peace, everybody's for unification, everybody's for the deal, but actually, it would be best if the status quo was maintained, which is fine. Well, some people believe it's fine. It's better not to, uh, open up Pandora's box, so to speak. But there are a lot of people that are for unification. It's mostly Korean-speaking population. Um, I saw one statistic that most Americans, 75% or more, are for the summit, even though probably most of them don't know what it means. And uh, the game you saw with between the U.S. and the North, I mean, there's all sorts of phrases that remind me because I mean, we used to do events in South Korea all the time, and it was so amazing how there was always something that would come up. A location would have to be changed. There would have to be another caveat to the negotiation with whomever you're doing the event with. There's always something new, right? The old bait and switch. At the last moment, something new had to be in place. There had to be another condition, more conditions. Well, that's not what we meant in our language. And that happens in the U.S. too, but because I mean I spent most of my time in Korea, I mean, my experience comes from trying to do events, working with individuals, working with groups on the Korean Peninsula, and people call it the kimchi style. This is the Kim Jong Un's family. The family name is Kim, so it's called the kimchi style, and it is this style of how do I say this nicely? It's a style that is very over the top, overreaching in most parts, right? So there'll be initial deal, an initial agreement for the summit, and then there'll be more and more caveats placed, right? So maybe the North Koreans didn't want to go to Singapore, and they said we don't really want to go to Singapore. We'd rather have it at Panmunjom, which I think is what they want. I'm not, quite sure, but I don't think they want to go to Singapore. And the U.S. was like, no, we want it at Singapore. So the North Koreans like, well, we can't cancel over Singapore. So instead, we'll just start ignoring them. And so I think Pompeo, Secretary of State Pompeo, uh, in I guess one of the committees on the Hill, was telling everybody, yeah, well, we reached out and they just started to ignore us. We didn't know what happened, and that is par for the course in my experience. It is exactly what you would expect. Um, you know, it's not that they didn't respond; they just didn't respond quickly. And Americans, God bless our hearts, we want immediate responses to emails. We want immediate reactions. And the North Korean officials probably were just like, well, let's just wait and see what happens if we ignore them. Maybe they'll make a mistake. Maybe if we annoy them, maybe if we ignore them a little bit, maybe they'll make some blunderous mistake. And then the summit will be off. We'll be seen as the good guys. We'll be seen as the people who wanted peace, peaceful resolution, unification. We already did it with the South Koreans, so of course you can trust us to do it again. And then the U.S. will be seen as dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, da. The U.S. will be seen as anti-unification, anti-peace, enemy of the Korean people, and everybody's, uh, you know, will project onto the situation whatever their, that narrative that they've been learning for so long, or the conspiracy theories. Ah, see, the U.S. wants a divided peninsula. The U.S. is evil. The U.S. is an enemy of the Korean people. And it was interesting to see the letter come out from Trump and his administration, and how they left the door open, and then the North Koreans immediately put it back on them. Oh, we're willing to talk. We're willing to do this. Oh, we don't know what you're talking about, which is, uh, oh, the drama of it all. I was telling somebody, I was telling the students, they often ask about, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Is the summit going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is it going to be successful? And you know, President Moon has a lot of. I believe they have upcoming elections in South Korea, North Korea. I'm not sure, but I'm still sure. there can be political gains and losses depending on if the summit happens for them. And then for the Trump administration, they have, I guess, the midterms coming up, so he probably wants a win on that level. And I just tell them, look, the leaders, all the leaders involved do stand to gain politically, so it would be wise to carry to um, do the summit. Now they might be seen as the loser of the summit, and that wouldn't be good, right? But until that point, it's all just a show. And I mean, it has been a fantastic show. It is a Korean drama times 10 in real life. It is just the, I guess the Koreans, they like to call it a little bit of miltang. Miltang is like push and pull. It's kind of what you do between girlfriends and boy or men and women, or I guess in general, in order to see how much the person is interested in you. Are you really interested in this summit, President Trump? Let us see you get emotional about it, right? So maybe maybe they wanted a little bit of emotion out of Trump. I don't know, but the militang, the push and the pull, um, is part of the negotiation, is part of the show, is part of the relationship, and um, I think in the West, folks often forget about relationships, and they just want to sort of, let's just do the deal, let's just get this done and over with. But in working overseas, working in Korea, the relationship is the most important. And you can have disagreements and you can have arguments and fights, but you should never sort of say that's it to the relationship. And um, this feeling out between the two parties, between the Trump administration and the North Korean administration and the South Koreans, is probably positive, as long as it turns out positively. Uh, but it is, oh man, the drama. It is just no wonder South Korea makes so much money off its dramas. I mean, it's just fantastic. So I wrote down some more notes here. Uh, the show must go on. I think the show will go on. Even if the summit's not on the 12th, it'll still happen at some point, or um, it'll continue either way. And the game is, and everybody should remember what the game is: who flinches first? Who's gonna who who's gonna lose their cool and be seen as the negative influence in blocking, or be seen as the influence of stopping unification, stopping the peace process. All right, and this is a long-term strategic tactic of negotiation. Right? Wear down your opponent, wear them down, wear them down, wear them down. Overreach, ask for more, overreach, wear them down, and uh, we'll see what happens. I don't think necessarily. Yeah, I have some other things here. Stay the course. It would be important to stay the course. All the Trump administration just has to be seen as for peace, for unification. And then if I was thinking the other night, like, what if Trump had shown up to the summit in Singapore, and then they didn't show up? And Korea, you might call this like a gap jill, right? Which is when the gap, the authority figure or the person in authority just ignores you, annoys you, or ignores, and then rejects, and then just doesn't show up. You get stood up at the. You're asked to go out on a date, and you just get stood up. So which is which is behavior to expect in this scenario. But it would have been interesting to see what happened. Trump shows up to the Singapore summit. There's nobody there from the North Korean side, and then what do you do at that point? Uh, the North Koreans would definitely look bad. The North Korean side would definitely look bad if they didn't show up. Um, maybe they would claim that it was too dangerous to travel, which is, I think, is why they don't want to go in the first place. They probably believe it's too dangerous to travel to Singapore. But it's all very exciting, isn't it? They couldn't just sit down and meet. We have airplanes and Skype chat rooms. Uh, Unbelievable. Um, right, yeah. Bolton. I'm not sure if Bolton was asked to go out there and say what he said. about the Libya model. And the Libya model is, if for those the Libyan model or the Libyan model of denuclearization would be for your country to give up its nuclear weapons, and then in a democratic fervor, feverish movement known as the Arab Spring, your country collapses into chaos. And then now I think there's an open market for slavery in Libya. So the Libyan model, I don't know why Bolton would say that except to provoke, which is what he got. He did get his reaction um, that he was probably going for. But I don't know. I don't think Trump. I mean, everybody thinks Trump, everything's coordinated by Trump, and then all of a sudden everything's not coordinated by Trump, and he's got no control, but then all of a sudden he has all the control, and you know that's that's a whole nother discussion in itself. But I think Bolton, we'll see what happens with Bolton's role. We'll see if he gets sidelined or at least possibly told to be quiet until things happen. Yeah, I was thinking if everybody's going to keep putting on caveats, why isn't there a caveat to for the free and open exchange of the Korean people from north and south, phone calls, internet access, movement, uh, the whole idea of the trains, traveling from Busan to Seoul to Pyongyang and all the way through China or Russia to London. Why not? Why don't we talk more about that and the opening up, or at least the allowance for unsupervised exchanges? Because there's always exchanges that are supervised by the North Korean and South Korean governments, but that's where you know the rubber meets the road, and you can see that neither party really wants to let go of the reins of communication and the flow of information between both parties. It could it could lead to unforeseen consequences. So yes. Oh, China. Yeah. So Kim Jong Un went up to China and probably, sort of leveraged his his offer. He got some offers from Trump. Say, hey, Xi Jinping, I just got all these deals from the Trumpster. They're gonna make us rich. What do you say to that? Because a lot of people don't know this, but the North Koreans don't really like the Chinese. Uh, the Chinese did let the North Korean people starve during the Great Famine, late 90s, early 2000s. Uh, they could have helped more. They did not. A lot of people view the Chinese as the ones actually against unification because then they would lose their buffer, and then they could possibly have uh, a democratic, somewhat free, somewhat democratic, but at least independent. A Jaju Jogin, Donglip Jogin, Nara. They would have one of those right on their border, so they'd have this very, very powerful unified state uh, without direct, use of, without like, complete control over them, which they like, the client state, and that goes back a long way. So, Kim Jong Un goes up to China and says, "Hey, I got this pretty good deal. What are you going to offer?" And then maybe Xi Jinping threw him some new deals, some new offers, and it gave him a little bit more confidence to go back down and renegotiate with the U.S. And that's just, I guess that's the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. But for the North Koreans, I would say, what do you have to lose? You know, what do you have to lose if you're with this abusive partner in the Chinese, and they let you starve to death during the Great Famine? What do you have to lose to at least unify with your brother in the South and try to make yourselves prosperous and peaceful into the new century? So yeah, I wasn't too shocked about all of that. So that's it. Hopefully, it doesn't get me in too much trouble for what I've said. We'll try to get this into Korean. But just remember, the U.S. is considered the devil and evil and keeping the two Koreas apart. So as long as the U.S., from I guess the U.S. policy perspective, is seen as at least trying to be part of the peace process and the unification of the two Koreas, then that puts the responsibility back on the two Koreas to get it done. Because at the end of the day, the two Koreas have to get it done. I mean, I don't know why North Korea canceled their military talks with the South, except to say, well, we're trying to get an issue ironed out with you, but there's no use talking to you. We'll just talk to the U.S. And that's normally the criticism is that the South Koreans are not an independent nation, which is absolutely ridiculous criticism. Um, but that's the criticism nonetheless. And so the North Koreans probably said, well, we want to discuss military and you getting rid of your American partner. And then the South Koreans like, well, we don't really want to do that. They're integral to our state. A big part of South Korea, what makes South Korea works, is the U.S. ROC alliance, and that's a mainstay. And really, it's good to hear that the Moon administration and administrations before this realized that the U.S. ROC alliance is very, very important and is a lasting alliance, both militarily and economically speaking. So what else can we finish on? So yeah, the show must go on, and I look forward to it going on, uh, because at least it's good television, it's good drama, it's good drama, it's good for everybody uh, to have this discussion about the role of the United States, the role of a unified, independent Korean peninsula. It's a great discussion to be focused on, other than all of the other nonsense that's been in the news lately. So, with that, I think that's long enough. You listen to me babble on, but it's if you have any questions, please no hate mail. I've gotten some really strange messages recently, which is why we sort of opted out of posting uh, opinion pieces for a while now. But there's just too much going on. There's so much going on so fast, so quickly, that you can't just reply with one article, and you can't just respond in a tweet or a chat. You sort of have to directly respond to it, in a longer format. And if you have any questions about anything else, please do email, or like most people do, they Facebook message. But I think that's it. Yeah, thank you for your time. All's well that ends well, and I believe that this, despite everything that's going on, it's still going. It's still moving in the right direction. It's still progressing forward, so to speak. So thank you for your time, and we will catch you next week on the Arirang Institute Bulgum Bulgum Talk Show podcast. Bulgum Bulgum means thank God it's Friday, by the way. All right, thank you, and bye.